My guest today is Jacqueline Arias, founder of Republica, Australia's only 100% fair trade and organic coffee company. Her mission is to make fair trade an everyday choice at supermarket checkouts all over Australia. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Tell us a little bit about how Republica came about.
Well, Republica came about, it was approximately 5 years or so ago. I'm married to a Canadian and I have 2 Aussie kids. And we were going to go back to my homeland, which is Colombia. I've been here pretty much all my life, but I was born in Colombia. Now, most of us know that Colombia has beautiful, beautiful coffee. Some of the world's best coffee grows in Colombia. So I said to my husband, we're going to be drinking fantastic coffee in Colombia. And of course, when we got there, it's a beautiful landscape, majestic mountains, and you know, there's coffee growing everywhere. But the surprising thing is that people didn't know what good coffee is, so they only drink instant coffee. And so what I realised was that the coffee that's grown in Colombia actually makes it all the way down to the port and then gets shipped out to the US and European countries where it gets made into instant coffee and then shipped back to Colombia and resold at inflated prices under a foreign brand. So that pretty much stirred me, and I thought it was pretty unfair, and also the fact that the locals didn't know how good coffee could really taste. They didn't understand what a cappuccino or a latte is. So I came back to Australia and I resigned from my former career. I knew this was my start in coffee, and just through my research I discovered the words fair trade. So that was really the seed for Republica.
Explain to us what fair trade is.
So fair trade is all about, so just as I explained, coffee comes from countries like Colombia, Ethiopia, Timor, Sumatra, all third world countries, and a lot of the products that you and I consume and most of the world consumes in first world countries like tea, chocolate, rice, they come from these third world countries, and those farmers are pretty much paid nothing by the big multinationals. And in fact, those prices of commodities, what they're known as commodities, those prices have plummeted and plummeted and plummeted, right, because we in the first world demand them to be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So fair trade is a movement, it's an international movement, and it's about ensuring that farmers in third world countries are paid a fair price. It's a stable price, it doesn't go up and down, it's absolutely stable, and it's a guaranteed price to the third world farmer.
Now, when you started out in this business, Australia was lagging behind on a global scale of where we were with fair trading. Where are we now?
Look, Australia, 5 years ago, few people had heard of the word fair trade. In fact, I would challenge very, very few people had heard of those words. There was no product on supermarket shelves, and we've caught up relatively quickly. We're still catching up. The UK is about 10 years ahead of the game in terms of fair trade. So in fact, if you go to the UK, you can buy fair trade bananas, sugar, biscuits, cereal. You can do your whole grocery shopping in fair trade, and it's mainstream. But Australia is now the fastest growing market for fair trade.
You've managed to put your product on the shelves of some of this country's bigger supermarket chains, and part of your growth is through distribution. How do you get big companies to get enrolled in your vision for fair trade?
Interestingly, a lot of people ask me, why do I want to do business with Coles and Woolworths? For me, I always wanted to make fair trade mainstream, because the more people who consume fair trade, the more impact we're going to have to third world farmers. So if you start from that point, then you know that you have to do business with Coles and Woolworths. So the first customer that I knocked on the doors of was Coles. And I educated them. I educated them about what was happening overseas. I told them what the trend was, how big the growth is, and that it was coming. It was coming to Australia, so they had to get on board. And lucky for me, they believed what I'd said, and they saw my presentation and the product that we had developed, and they gave me a go. And then the second customer was Woolworths.
The industry, the coffee industry, is male dominated. And here you are, we've already heard you're a mum and a woman. Has there been a barrier that you've had to overcome, or has there been an impact on the fact that you are a woman in trying to get across your vision?
In the beginning, when I was trying to source fair trade coffee, and I went around and spoke to a lot of people in coffee, like you said, very much heavily male dominated, and a lot of these males have been in the industry for 20 plus years. So when they looked at me, first of all they said there's no such thing as good fair trade coffee, and secondly they just didn't believe in what I was doing at all. So I actually liked that because it really threw the challenge to me to prove them wrong. And I guess also the beauty about that is that because they are so they're so in bed with each other, they don't see what the possibilities outside of how they've been doing business for such a long time are, and that's what I was able to see, so it's great.
Well, that fresh perspective sometimes is what you need to break through. Now, you mortgaged your house to start this business. That's a big risk. Yeah, it was a big risk. I've got a great partner. My husband's fantastic and he was extremely supportive, and you know, I think he said you only live once and you've got to give it a go. And I was so passionate. I don't think I ever doubted that this wasn't going to work. I don't think I ever woke up and thought this is not going to work. I always believed if this is working around the world, why can't it work in Australia? And Australians are, you know, we like to help the others. We're the first to throw in our support behind Timor and when there's tsunamis, etc. So why wouldn't fair trade? And you know, at the end of the day, who in the 21st century is going to say we believe in continuing to exploit the third world? Yeah. Tell me, from your experience as a businesswoman, is there anything that you'd like to share as far as lessons you've learned that you think might be of value to others? There are so many lessons, but if you're asking me to reduce it down to two, first one I would say is don't give up. You know, one of the great stories that I learned early on was the guy who created the Sydney Bridge. He knocked on doors for 10 years. It took him 10 years to get that project off the ground. So when you get a knockback, think about those kinds of instances where people have been really, you know, a wall in front of them and they've just kept going and going and going. And if you're passionate, you'll get through all of those walls. So that's lesson number one. And number two, I would say, is educate yourself. Really learn, pick up a book, read, become the expert in the industry that you're in. You know, show others new ways of doing things. Be a leader in that space. So really get out there and learn and read. Great. Thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome. Thank you.